Are you visually impaired and have experiences like this?
I noticed that during the day I would feel so tired, and then in the afternoons especially, I would just feel sleepy, and I would have to just get up and keep moving in order to function and get through the day. But I had no idea what was causing it.
Today, a possible reason for your experience on Weekend Connection. I'm Vic Gregory, and let's get connected. Some people who are visually impaired are able to perceive light in some respect. However, there is a segment of the population in America today that cannot discern any light whatsoever. And because of that, they are susceptible to a condition that makes it difficult to sleep and be awake at normal times. The condition is called non-24 sleep-wake disorder. And today on Weekend Connection, we'll take a look at the condition and what can be done to help those who suffer from it. Joining me today is Dr. Timothy Morgenthaler. Dr. Morgenthaler is a past president of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and is board certified in sleep medicine, pulmonary medicine, and critical care medicine. He is a professor of medicine at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and serves as the Mayo Clinic Patient Safety Officer. His main clinical interests are sleep-disordered breathing, patient safety, and improving healthcare delivery. Dr. Morgenthaler, we welcome you to our broadcast today.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, let's begin with an overview of what we are referring to when we say someone is suffering with non-24 sleep-wake disorder. What exactly is that condition?
Sure. Non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder is one of many different sleep disorders, and it happens to be one of those that falls into the category that we call circadian rhythm sleep disorders. And let me just give you a little insight into what we're talking about there. It's estimated that something on the order of 30 to 60 million Americans have different sleep disorders. They fall into a variety of categories. Probably one of the most common ones out there are sleep-related breathing disorders like obstructive sleep apnea syndrome. There are people who have, we say, disorders of hypersomnia, where really they have a brain disorder that causes them to be excessively sleepy. Narcolepsy would be a classic example. But there's also a group of individuals who the basic settings or functions of their internal biological clocks are not really working the way everyone else's does. And the result is that they end up with their internal biological clocks being in a very out of tune with the external environment. And so they behave very differently in terms of when they feel sleepy or when they feel awake. In this particular disorder, non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder, patients who have this have symptoms of either insomnia or excessive sleepiness that are occurring really because of their intrinsic biological clock not being in tune with the external 24-hour light-dark cycle. And so the result is that there are times when everyone else is ready to go to bed, everybody else is sleeping. Gee, I need to be sleeping now because I have to be alert for school or for work or whatever tomorrow. And gee, they can't get to sleep. And then maybe a month later or something, actually they're perfectly able to get to sleep. The flip side of that, the daytime side of that is on those nights when they're having a hard time getting to sleep, daylight comes along, they haven't had to sleep, now they're supposed to be at work, they're supposed to be functioning, they're supposed to be interacting with their family members, and they're sleepy, and they're sleepy both because they haven't slept, but they're also sleepy because their biological clock is now at the time when it thinks they should be sleeping. So they get out of sync. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And how prevalent is this condition in society?
Well, it's thought that probably over half of totally blind individuals have non-24-hour circadian rhythm. Maybe 50 to 80% of blind individuals complain of some sleep disturbances.
As I was researching this condition, I found that there wasn't a lot of information available, and there didn't seem to be many people who were aware of the condition. Is non-24 sleep-wake disorder a fairly unknown condition?
I think it's fairly uncommon overall, because again, I think predominantly it affects individuals who are blind or have significant impairment of vision. And I think then of those who have this condition, many of them aren't aware that they have it. So I think there's a knowledge deficit that in some ways makes us not aware of how prevalent it is. And then I think overall it's not a highly prevalent cause of sleep disturbances.
Well, you just said it, and my next question would be, why is it that many people who have this condition are not aware that they have it? What is it that keeps them from recognizing that?
I think overall it's education and the spread of knowledge. I mean, when you consider, let's take some much more common sleep disorders like obstructive sleep apnea syndrome. Again, I realize this particular interview topic today isn't about that, but I'm using it by analogy. It's estimated that there's 30 million Americans who have obstructive sleep apnea syndrome. About 80% are not diagnosed. Why is that? Well, there are barriers to them getting diagnosed and treated, but more often it's because people aren't really aware of the syndrome or aren't aware of the symptoms or don't think that they have it. And I think that same level of knowledge about sleep and sleep disorders would certainly be present in blind or sight-impaired individuals who might have even less common sleep disorders like circadian rhythm sleep disorders.
Well, you've referred to the circadian rhythm of the body. Let's delve into that a little more. What are we talking about when we refer to the body's circadian clock and it's not being reset the way that it is normally in an individual's life?
Sure. So first of all, let's just look at the word circadian. It's circadian. It's around the day. So it's really referring to a clock period of approximately 24 hours. And for us, humans are designed to be awake and active during the day and to be rested and sleeping during the night. That's really the way our biology works. But you have to ask the question, well, how does the body know the difference? And the answer is that actually every cell in our body has in it genes, they're actually called clock genes, that are telling our body parts what time of that 24-hour period it's living in. Now, I'm old enough that back when I was in grade school and junior high, we had these clocks on the wall in school.
Mm-hmm.
And what would happen, like at daylight savings time, spring forward, fall back, or even periodically across the year, is you could watch the hands on the clock and they would get recalibrated.
Right.
That they would all sort of come to the same time. And that's actually the way that we've been designed too, is we have sort of a master clock that lives up in our brain, in the hypothalamus. And that master clock sends out signals to the rest of the cells of the body to say, okay, now let's get in synchronization. This is, you are now entering night. You are now entering day. And how does that master clock decide whether we're in night or day? Is it takes signals from the environment. Like one of the most potent signals is light and dark. So literally as we start entering into the dark phase, the back of our eyeballs notice that it's getting dark. That information is communicated to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus communicates with the pituitary gland and releases melatonin. That melatonin becomes, in essence, a synchronization marker for the body to say, okay, we're entering nighttime. In these individuals who have non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder, that light or darkness synchronization signal is not being received. We know from experiments that if you take a human and you put them in an environment of constant light, so there's no variation, that actually our internal biological clocks are wired to run a little bit longer than a 24-hour period. So if I'm not perceiving the changes in light and dark in my environment, what will happen is every turn of the clock, I'll be just a little bit later in time, if you will. And so my internal signal is not a 24-hour signal. It's actually going a little bit longer than that.
What tests and procedures would a doctor conduct to help a patient determine if he or she has this condition?
Most often, the biggest aid in diagnosing non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder is a good history. And that history is both a sleep history, so really learning more about your sleep complaints, and that just takes time to solicit a detailed history that, is over time. What kind of symptoms has the person been having? Part of that medical history would also be gathering important facts about related health issues. And certainly, if I were seeing an individual with blindness who also was complaining of waxing and waning symptoms of insomnia, I would start to think, I wonder if this is non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder. We can often get some confirmatory information by using a test that's called actigraphy. Actigraphy, it's really sort of the predecessor and a fancier version of a Fitbit, if you will, or a Garmin, or an Apple iWatch. But basically, it's a device that one wears on your wrist, for the most part, and it measures with a very sensitive accelerometer movement. let's say I gave one of these to an individual for 2 weeks to wear, we make some assumptions when we download the information that if they're moving all over the place, they're probably not asleep. If they're absolutely perfectly still, they probably took the watch off and left on their bathroom sink by accident. But if they're barely moving, then there's actually some calibrations and computer programs that can say, hey, they're asleep during this period, in all likelihood. And what we would see then when we line up those tracings day by day by day over 2 weeks is we'd see this kind of march of the wake period slightly later in every one of those periods. So you'd actually see graphically this non-24-hour behavior.
We're talking with Dr. Timothy Morgenthaler. He is a board-certified doctor in sleep medicine and pulmonary medicine and is a professor of medicine at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And we're discussing the condition known as non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder. Dr. Morgenthaler, is there a cure for this disorder?
Well, we don't have a cure for this disorder, but there are often treatments that can be very helpful. And if I might, I'm going to actually share a little vignette, something that happened very early in my career. So I finished my training at Mayo Clinic, and I went into private practice in a city in the South. And one of my very early experiences in sleep medicine, I actually was busy training a sleep technologist to help me do in-lab sleep tests, polysomnography. And during our conversations about how to score and how to set up and everything, she mentioned to me that her daughter was having problems falling asleep on the bus. She was missing her stop. And then she mentioned to me that her daughter was blind. So I talked with her more, and I learned very quickly that she had all of the symptoms of non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder.
How about
and there again, she hadn't learned nothing about it, and I just happened to know about it because of my training. And I said, I wonder if we might try a little bit of melatonin, a timed melatonin taken in the evening, along with some healthy sleep habits, trying to avoid stimulants to prepare the person so that they could more likely achieve sleep and things like that. And so she took all that down and she said, well, let's try it. So she tried it. Well, she came back a week later and she said, this is a miracle. This has changed her life. This kid can now actually go to school and she can actually sleep. It's not perfect, but boy, it's so much better. And so you can imagine that was quite a positive feedback to me that, hey, this is actually something that's worthwhile learning about and applying. It was a very gratifying clinical experience.
Absolutely. Now, is that something that works in everyone who has the disorder, just utilizing the melatonin?
There's almost nothing that works in everybody, but there are some recommended treatments for non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder. And actually, I think if you go to sleepeducation.org, I haven't looked there, but I'm pretty sure they would have something about it right there. And then the American Academy of Sleep Medicine has actually put together treatment recommendations for circadian rhythm sleep disorders. And at the time those were put together, melatonin was certainly a part of the treatment recommendations along with timed sleeping. But since that time, there's also been an additional medication that has come out, which is in essence still a melatonin-like medication, and it's available by prescription. Okay. So there's those things. I think in general most of us would probably recommend as a starting point, though, trying melatonin and timed sleeping and so forth.
Well, we're just about out of time, and as we wrap up, what would you like to share with listeners who may be suffering from this disorder?
Well, I think what I would say is if you are a sight-challenged individual and you are struggling with difficulties falling asleep, staying asleep, being awake and alert at the right times of day, I would definitely take that opportunity to seek out, first of all, with your primary care physician, let them understand more about your struggles, and that you could even suggest, if they don't right off suggest it and know what to do, you could suggest that, could I get a referral or could I go to a sleep medicine specialist to learn more about how to address that? And I think the importance of doing that is we know that sleep, getting healthy sleep, an adult should really aim for at least 7 hours of sleep on a nightly basis, is an absolutely critical component of health. And when I say health, I'm talking about our physical health, our emotional health, our spiritual health, and I think it's just an area where your quality of life can be helped so much. So I would encourage you to seek out professional help in those areas.
We've been talking with Dr. Timothy Morgenthaler. He is a professor of medicine specializing in sleep and pulmonary medicine at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And Dr. Morgenthaler, we want to thank you again for joining us today. You have been very helpful in giving us insight concerning non-24 sleep-wake disorder.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that's our broadcast, and we invite you to be sure and join us again next week when we once again will address a topic of interest for the Christian community here on BBN's Weekend Connection.
Thank you for listening to this feature, a production of BBN, the Bible Broadcasting Network. BBN provides 24-hour Christian programming, great Christian music, and Bible teaching. Listen to BBN by clicking the link in the description.